I had not planned to be a weaver. We were about 2,000 women bundled up against the fall chill. We had marched across Arlington Cemetery in Washington, D.C. We had grieved, planting cardboard gravestones in a patch of lawn. Now we were about 20 feet from the Pentagon's massive stone edifice. I was shouting, really screaming at the top of my lungs. It was the moment of rage. Carefully planned by a wonderful group of women, including Grace Paley, Maya Angelou, Anna Georgi, the Women's Pentagon action was quite orchestrated. The plan was to grieve, to rage, then to circle around the Pentagon. Now the speeches by Grace and Maya began. But without ample amplification, they were hard to hear. And then I saw the weavers. Up on the granite steps leading to one of the Pentagon's entrances, there was a handful of women, perhaps 9 or 10, very quietly and very intently creating a web of red, orange, and yellow strands of yarn. This horizontal web stretched between several of the metal banisters that divided the flight of steps, and to weave this web, which was at hip height, they were crawling about underneath it. To my complete surprise, I found myself half running, half walking very swiftly across the approximately 20 feet of pavement that separated the crowd of protesters to the Pentagon steps. I lay down on my back on the stairs and scooted up underneath the yarn. Once you were underneath the web, you were out of reach and could not be arrested. Someone handed me a ball of yarn. Suddenly, the other demonstrators were far, far away. Here was a simple task. Push the wool up and over a thread, move to another location, make a loop, push the yarn through, move crabwise along the steps, scoot over to a co-weaver, exchange your ball of orange yarn for one of crimson red. Be quick, be calm. From the vantage point of 2016 and from the viewpoint of post 9/11 terrorist attack hyper-militarized police days, it is well nigh impossible to imagine the scene. First, one could march right up to one of the Pentagon columned entrances, as had our determined crew of women protesters. Yes, there were extra policemen and security guards on duty. Yes, some of them had a bit of swagger. Yes, we knew they had guns on their hips, but they were standing about looking a bit confused. We were making a terrific racket. Second, although these guards had pistols, they carried no other accoutrements of war. There was no tear gas. There were no bulletproof vests. Nobody had their fingers lightly resting on the trigger of a military assault weapon. Nor were batons out, ready to deliver a bone-crunching thrashing. Water cannons, pepper spray, orange plastic crowd control mesh were nowhere in sight. 20-ton armored personnel tanks were also missing. Nary an attack dog was in sight, with or without blood dripping from their tongues. Neither were these guards wearing black metal helmets or plastic face shields. No, the policemen had cloth caps with rather silly visors, and the security guards were wearing baseball caps, an image not yet appropriated by Trump and his pals. No one was screaming orders or threatening arrest. Most importantly, these guys had faces you could see. You could read the expressions on their faces. You could see their eyes, see the twitch in a cheek. In short, one of the basic means of human communication, what we are doing with our facial muscles, was a possibility. We were humans together in this odd moment. Not that the moment wasn't scary. Yes, we weavers focused on our weaving. Still, there was a prickly awareness. The cops are there. What are they going to do? So we continually cast quick glances in their direction. Some security guards looked embarrassed. After all, they were confronted by something, on the face of it, absurd. Women screaming and beating on pots was one thing. Women quietly weaving, however, was way, way off the radar. No doubt it was emotionally confusing. Not only was it on some level utterly harmless, it also was peculiarly female. Who knows which of those guards had a beloved aunt or grandmother they'd seen knitting? Who knows what memories of a favorite sweater all that yarn evoked? Some of the guards seemed stunned. Indeed, they'd been disarmed. You cannot shoot down a skein of yarn. After some minutes of work, we weavers quietly passed along the message. They don't have the tools with which to cut the yarn. One of the weavers had overheard two security guards talking. A guard had gone off to find knives or scissors. Elation! I remember lying on my back, my arms lifted above me, busy with my yarn. Yes, biting at the edge of my being was fear. Would I be arrested? Would I be hurt? But I also remember the feeling of relief and joy upon hearing the word scissors. They would have to ask a Pentagon secretary, doubtless a female, for that. I imagined a guard leaning over a secretary's desk, then a tad sheepishly, "Excuse me, do you have a pair of scissors?" "A what?" "In fact, several pairs of scissors." Meanwhile, we had more time for our endeavors. More yarn, more weaving. Was I a weaver for 10 minutes? 20? I do not know. Time slid out of its usual borders. Quietly, doggedly, we continued building our web, gradually getting closer to the top of the flight of steps. I remember looking up through the now dense and impenetrable tangle of brilliant red, yellow, and orange hues, feeling how utterly right this moment was. Years later, I would learn that the action was designed to reweave, metaphorically, the web of life that is torn asunder by bombs and missiles. At the time, all I knew was, wow, for a few moments, we had won. A handful of women had blocked one segment of the stairs leading into the heart of the U.S. military. Then the signal for the end. A Pentagon staffer, all military efficiency, came briskly marching up the steps. He was off to the side, where we had not yet cast our web. Even so, a button on his uniform became entangled in a skein. Mad as hell, but also trying to maintain his dignity, he yanked and pulled. Finally, he freed the button and strode into the Pentagon. By now I had reached the top of the stairs. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a security guard with a knife. It wasn't a huge, threatening hunter's knife, just a knife. He'd started to cut the multiple strands of yarn. These weren't violent slashes, just methodical, strand-by-strand cuts. In fact, the task required two hands, one to hold the yarn taut, the other to cut through, and that was just one strand. Removing the web was going to be laborious and take quite a few minutes. I knew our time was up. I slipped out from underneath the web and stood up. A guard and I exchanged a shy smile. I walked back down the Pentagon steps to rejoin the phalanx of protesters. I never met or knew the names of any of the other weavers. I suspect some were arrested, but I was not. One thing is certain. Each of us was changed in many unfathomable ways by that moment of power, that moment of saying no to blood, death, and war. That moment of saying, yes, we will reweave the web of life.